What if the most disturbing human behaviors are not a modern invention, not a defect of our current society, but an echo from our deepest past, a relic buried in our evolutionary wiring? This is the question we will explore as we journey into the primitive shadows of a mind that was forged not for peace, not for morality, but for survival. And these evolutionary pressures, well, they were not gentle. They were the relentless forces of predation, of scarcity, of violent conflict between groups. For millennia, this was the reality that chiseled our psychology. The behaviors we see today, both the noble and the truly terrifying, are the living artifacts of that long, brutal history. So, the foundations for certain extremes of violence aren't necessarily signs of a broken modern mind. Instead, they can be understood as the reemergence of ancient survival mechanisms. These are the primitive shadows that linger within our shared biology. Traits that were once absolutely essential for survival in a savage world, but have become dangerously incompatible with the cooperative societies we've built. To really grasp this, we have to appreciate the immense timescale we're talking about. Our world of cities, laws, and global connection, it's just a brief flash in the deep history of our species. For almost all of our existence, we were hunter-gatherers on a hostile planet. Our brains were shaped, hardened during that vast preceding era, a time when the rules of survival were written in blood. You see, the wiring of the human brain wasn't optimized for happiness or fairness. It was optimized for persistence. Survival was the only metric of success. This meant our brains became wired to prioritize immediate threats over long-term consequences, a trait that can have absolutely devastating effects in a world that demands foresight and impulse control. So let's examine the specific tools, the weapons and armor that this environment forged in our minds. The brain became this exquisite instrument of survival, equipped with systems designed for threat detection, for rapid response, and for the chilling ability to suppress anything, like empathy, that might get in the way of a life-or-death action. The prefrontal cortex, you can think of it as the CEO of the brain. It's the calm, rational leader that keeps the more primal, emotional parts in check. It's a relatively new development, evolutionarily speaking, the part of us that says, wait, let's think about this before we act. It is the voice of reason that dampens the fires of raw instinct. But deep within the brain lies a much older, much more primal structure, the amygdala. This is the ancient alarm system, the sleepless sentinel that is always scanning the horizon for danger. It's the part of us that screams threat before our conscious mind even has a chance to register what's happening. And to make sure that those life-sustaining actions were repeated, evolution gave us a powerful internal reward system. When an early human succeeded in a hunt, in defending territory, in dominating a rival, the brain released dopamine, reinforcing that behavior. It's a simple, brutally effective mechanism. What works for survival feels good, so you do it again. But what happens when the system starts rewarding behaviors that are no longer about survival, but about something far darker? And this is where we see the tragic mismatch between our ancient wiring and our modern world. A highly tuned threat detection system, once a lifesaver, can become a prison of paranoid anxiety. The ability to suppress empathy and necessity when facing a mortal enemy can curdle into a chilling lack of remorse. The drive for dominance can become a pathological obsession with control, and the brain's reward for survival can be twisted into a horrifying reinforcement of violence itself. This brings us to perhaps the most dangerous mechanism of all, the reinforcement loop. This is how a single act of violence can become a raging fire in the brain, a compulsive, self-perpetuating cycle of destruction, all driven by the brain's own powerful chemistry. Think of it like carving a path in a dense forest. The first time, it's difficult. But with each repetition, the path gets deeper, wider, easier to follow. The same is true for neural pathways. With each act of dominance, and the rewarding hit of dopamine that follows, the brain makes it neurologically easier, even necessary, to commit the next one. This is where fantasy and reality can start to blur. As that reinforcement loop strengthens, the individual might begin to fantasize about the act, rehearsing it in their mind. This mental rehearsal can be just as rewarding as the act itself, further deepening those neural pathways and making the eventual physical violence almost inevitable. The ancient mechanism for learning has been hijacked. But what ignites this fire in the first place? It's not a single spark. No, it's a perfect storm of factors, a rare and catastrophic convergence of nature and nurture that pushes an individual to the absolute fringe of human behavior. prolonged exposure to severe stress, whether from abuse, neglect, or the constant terror of an unstable environment, can fundamentally alter the brain's development. The amygdala can become permanently hyperactive, trapped in a state of high alert, while the delicate neural pathways for empathy and emotional regulation may just wither and fail to form properly. The result is a perfect storm, a potential genetic predisposition combined with a brain that is both hypersensitive to threats and numb to the suffering of others. Add to that a childhood steeped in trauma, a life of profound social isolation, and the stage is set for the emergence of an extreme behavioral outlier. So what we label as monstrous is, from a deep time perspective, simply one of nature's rare and divergent outcomes. Now, this doesn't excuse the behavior, not at all, but it does force us to ask a difficult question. Are these individuals truly evil, or are they the unfortunate products of a biological and environmental lottery they never chose to enter? To really understand this phenomenon, we have to look beyond our own species, because, as it turns out, we are not the only ones who produce these evolutionary outliers. The potential for this behavior lies dormant elsewhere in the animal kingdom. So is this kind of repetitive, remorseless killing a uniquely human problem? The answer, it seems, is no. The seeds of this behavior can be found in other intelligent social animals, a chilling reminder of our own deep evolutionary roots. In chimpanzees, for instance, scientists have observed organized, lethal raids on neighboring groups that seem to go beyond simple territorial disputes. These acts of systematic violence, while very rare, suggest that the capacity for such behavior is not a purely human invention, but an ancient potential we share with our closest relative. One of the defining psychological traits in these cases is a profound lack of fear. These individuals often don't learn from punishment or respond to threats in the way most people do. This fearlessness, an invaluable asset for our ancestors facing down a predator, becomes the very thing that allows for transgression against all social order. The ancient virtue has become the ultimate pathology. Ultimately, studying these extreme behaviors isn't just about them, it's about us. It's about understanding the darkness that lies at the very edge of human potential, and the fragile safeguards of empathy and reason that keep it at bay. It is a sobering reminder that the line between a hero and a monster is not a wall, but a razor's edge. An edge that our species has been walking for millennia.